The tempter came and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread." But he answered, "It is written, one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God." Then the devil took him to the holy city and placed him on the pinnacle of the temple, saying to him, "If you are the Son of God, then throw yourself down, for it is written, He will command His angels concerning you, and on their hands they will bear you up, so that you will not dash your foot against a stone." Jesus said to him, "Again, it is written, do not put the Lord your God to the test." Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and all their splendor. And he said to him, "All of these I will give you if you will fall down and worship me." Jesus said, "Away with you, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve only Him." Then the devil left him, and suddenly angels came and waited on him. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Sermon title could also be, "Mom, you got to kick them out of the basement sooner or later." So we probably all heard the story, the basic story of Adam and Eve. A lot of people go looking for this place somewhere in central Iraq, I believe. And we can look at the story as just clearly a set of facts, historically say this is what happened. But as always, there's like a ton of deeper meanings to this if we look at this on deeper levels. I'll tell you a story my grandmother told me. So my grandmother was born very, very poor in a little town called Daytona Beach, Florida, which is just south of Jacksonville, right? It's kind of a beach town. My grandfather was a country boy. He and his brother born and raised on a farm in Middleburg, Florida, which is kind of over in the center. And when the Depression came, and my grandmother was an orphan, she was adopted. When the Depression came, my grandfather was very, very fortunate because he got a job with the Florida East Coast Railroad Company. And he was a salesman. And later on, he and his brother ended up starting a produce company, but during this time, he traveled the rails up and down the east coast of Florida. And he would stop in at Daytona Beach and visit this little gal that he met named Lucille. And he and Lucille sort of hit it off, and they would go to the soda shop, and they would do things together. And they started to get to be close until my grandmother said, she called him Milton, which was his middle name, which is my middle name. "Milton, I really like you, but you need to stop telling all these dirty jokes." And she says, "Charlie, your grandpa just couldn't quit telling dirty jokes. He was hanging around with those railroad folks all the time, and all they did was tell dirty jokes. And I tell him again and again, you've got to quit telling dirty jokes." And he couldn't quit telling dirty jokes until finally I said, "Milton, I really like you, but I'm not going to see you anymore. You can't stop telling dirty jokes. And so I won't see you ever again. I'm not going to see you anymore." Well, of course, my grandfather now wanted Lucille more than ever. Because why? See the parallel? She was the forbidden fruit. And it was the only way that my grandmother got my grandfather to quit telling dirty jokes. And he quit telling dirty jokes. He was a dirty joke teller as the son of a Baptist minister, which preacher's kids, we all know about preacher's kids. This kind of stuff, it goes on today. I say a lot of times, things don't change very, very much. Can I get one more? University of British Columbia had a study. I'm not sure exactly when this was, but it basically says here in 2023, like it was in whatever year of the Garden of Eden, if you tell someone that they can't have one particular thing, the mind focuses and obsesses on that one thing. You've got to have that one thing, that forbidden fruit. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. And it says one of the reasons why things like Weight Watchers work and things like that is because you have large groups of people, because it takes large groups of people to support each other to not desire that one thing that really needs to be denied of us. Can I get one more? So we have our idyllic setting. I told the story about my grandmother and grandfather because I think it's what this story really is. It's a family story. So my father's side of the family was an orphan girl who married a railroad salesman. It's my family story. We also have stories that are the stories of us. You have your family stories. How did your parents meet? How did your grandparents meet? Why did you move out to Idaho? What brought you here? Why are you still in Parma? Where did you go to school? Adam and Eve is the story of us. We think that this story, a lot of people think the Bible is written first Genesis, then Exodus, then Leviticus. No, this was probably written in the time of the Babylonian captivity, and it was a story to tell the Israelites not to lose heart. This is where we came from. This is who we are. And I think it's a story of all of us, too. So if we look at this in a deeper meaning, what happens? It's perfect, right? It's paradise. The breezes are balmy. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. It's just right. It's perfect. The animals, you don't have to worry about the animals because the animals don't attack humans because everyone eats fruit. It's such a safe and wonderful place. You can walk around naked. That's how safe it is. You don't have to worry that when you get to the end of the checkout line that there's a GQ or a Cosmopolitan magazine there telling you in the Garden of Eden that you're too fat or whatever. Your hair's not good. It's that safe until we have someone that comes and wants to plant a stink bomb in the Garden of Eden. So the devil whispers into Satan's ear, who must have had legs at this point, go and try to see if you can disrupt this scene. By the way, Satan, all the angels had to bow down to Adam and Eve according to ancient rabbinical writings. And this was the straw that broke the camel's back for Satan. He was like, that's it. I'm not bowing down to these human beings. So the serpent goes to Eve, and we have the first recorded theological discussion in history. Did God really say that? Why did he go to Eve first? We don't really know. The rabbis think that Eve was smarter than Adam. Adam was a little thick. So we go to Eve first. She's a little smarter. Maybe it's because she wasn't there when God gave the commandment not to eat of that tree. But at any rate, what happens? He holds out the apple and she sees it. And it's lush, and it's ripe, and it's plump, and it's juicy. And it's the one thing they're not allowed to have. And so she takes that fateful bite, the first bite. And for 3,000 years now, it's women's fault, right? It's all y'all's fault. Everything was perfect until Eve had to do that, right? And so we blamed women for 5,000 plus years. You know, it's all your fault. But if we look at the story a little closer, what else is going on here? She gave some to her husband who was with her. Well, if men have all the smart ideas and we have all the great decisions, one would think that he could have said, well, oh, hold on. Maybe that's not such a good idea. Don't take it. No, he didn't. He sat there and watched, and he said, you know, that looks pretty good to me too. And he took a bite. And then what happened? Their innocence is lost. They become self-aware. This is the fall, right? Is it really the fall? Adam and Eve's relationship with God is like an infant with its mother. There's no differentiation between the two. They're essentially great big giant children. And now their innocence is lost and they've become what we call self-aware. They've become aware that we are not God, and now we're naked. Oh my gosh. And so God tearfully ejects them from the Garden of Eden. This self-awareness, though, when we think about relationships, what's my next slide, Kate? This is from Howard Thurman. And it leads us to think, why did God put the tree there in the first place? Why did God do that? Something very comforting and reassuring about innocence. Dwelling in innocence is where everything is perfect. If you're someone who your child loses a job and says, oh my God, Mom, Dad, I gotta move back in with you. I'm not talking about you. If you're mom and dad and your child goes through a divorce and she says, I gotta move back in with you, I'm not talking about that. If you have an elderly parent and the kids get together and say, one of us has got to take care of Dad, I'm not talking about you. If you're 32 years old and you never hit a lick at a snake, you sleep till noon, Mom brings you meatloaf in the basement, and you're sitting in your underwear video gaming Grand Theft Auto with someone in Singapore, I am talking about you. Adam and Eve, just like Grand Theft Auto meatloaf eater, had to leave the garden. It had to happen sooner or later. Can you have a relationship with someone that you never have a disagreement with? Is that a real relationship? No. Can you have a relationship with someone that you're not differentiated yourself from them? No. If you're absolutely beholden and dependent upon someone else, can you have a relationship? No. So in other words, it had to happen. And that's the rabbinical, deeper meaning in this. Can I get one more? And it's not the world, it does get turned upside down when we become self-aware. The world does, it hurts. It hurts to leave the garden. The mind does not like to change, particularly as we get older. We really don't like new information. But it's something that has to happen somewhere along the way. It doesn't just have to happen in relationships, moving out of the basement. This is something that happens. Can I get my next slide? This is something that happens when we're asked to change our worldview in relationships. I think this is interesting. I don't know about you all. I think AI, frankly, has some very scary aspects to it. And I think what God is doing in this story is, I want to have a relationship not with robots, but with someone who has the freedom to disagree with me. Someone who has the freedom to either love me or to reject me. That's the only real love. That's the only kind of a real relationship. AI computer shuts down when we talk about feelings. I think that is so wonderful. Because a real relationship can't be with a robot. It has to be with a human being with individual agency. As I sort of start to wrap up, can I get my last slide? I have a friend who is in Alabama, and he called me recently, and his church that the pastor is baptized him, baptized his children, married his mom and dad, everybody that he knows and loves in the small town in Alabama goes to this church, and he loves it. It's his family. And there's all of a sudden new concepts and new ideas that are being introduced into this church, and it's tearing it apart. Should women be ordained in ministry and able to teach men? Or do they need to stay in the nursery? Of course, the issue of LGBTQ issues are coming up. And my friend is kind of unsettled with the whole thing, and the whole church is as well. And the pastor got up and made a very tearful speech and said he was leaving the Methodist Church after 40 years in ministry because the new seminaries were teaching people that they need to read things in context and they need to consider new information and new ways of thinking about things. The historical facts need to be played in with culture. And he said, that's not the way we need to do it. It says it like this on paper, and this is the way we've got to go. He doesn't want to leave the garden. He doesn't want to leave the garden. As I wrap up, maybe this story is more about who God is than just about us. Because what happens? It's the first recorded sin. They make a mistake. God says you're going to die. Do they die? Eventually, but not right away. Who is God? God is like a grandmother who looks on and sees, you've made a mistake. That's okay. Now we can have a real relationship. And in the meantime, I'd best get my knitting needles and start showing you how to knit some clothes. Because it gets mighty cold outside the garden at night. Amen.